Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining this session at the 2022 Tribal EPA Region 9 Conference. I have been fortunate and thankful for the opportunity to present at this conference for the past several years now, and each time it has been a great experience. A little bit about me: I'm an entomologist currently serving as Associate in Extension for Community IPM at the University of Arizona. I'm a strong advocate and educator about IPM or integrated pest management, which is the best way to manage pests in any situation. This year, my co-presenter on this important topic is Kelly Jendrisak. Kelly is the air quality specialist at the Intertribal Council of Arizona and a wonderful collaborator on so many events and activities with us. In this presentation, I will start by giving an overview about community IPM, its importance and challenges. And then Kelly will take over and talk about how indoor air quality ties in with IPM. I want to start with a definition for community environments. Here's a simple one. A community environment is a social unit of any size that is unified by space or the interests of its inhabitants, and where humans interact with the natural environment at varying levels. So, what immediately comes to mind when you hear this definition? Well, here are a number of examples: schools, childcare centers, homes, hospitals, retirement, nursing facilities or medical facilities, restaurants and hotels, parks and playgrounds, etc. So many. And so many places where people and sometimes their domestic animals, family members live, work, play, or interact. The common factor in all community environments clearly is people, right? So, community environments host diverse people in confined spaces for varying amounts of time. Now, we saw one common factor in all community environments, which is people, but there's one more very important point here. They house some of the most vulnerable sections of the population, namely children and the elderly. These groups are typically unable or less able to make informed decisions regarding pest management and pesticide use, right? We know this. Children are too young to make those decisions, and they're also more vulnerable than adults to the risks caused by pests and pest management. And the same goes with the elderly. Sometimes they're unable, physically unable, and they have sometimes loss of certain physical capabilities like sight or hearing. So it goes without saying that any action taken with regard to pest management in these environments or anything else that concerns health and safety really has to take these individuals into consideration. And if not, that can have really drastic consequences. Now, here are some more characteristics of community environments. They have diverse physical spaces. So there's indoors and outdoors, and some are a combination of indoor and outdoor, like a patio, for example. So these places require customized solutions to pest management problems. And because many of these spaces are ideal entry points and harborages for pests. And additionally, residents of community environments or people who interact with community environments have different health problems sometimes. Some people have asthma, allergies, or immune system compromising diseases. And to top everything, there are diminishing budgets and deferred maintenance issues, right? So the bottom line is that community environments are really challenging places for pest management. Here, I'm trying to draw comparisons between different kinds of environments. And I'm trying to bring out the reasons why community environments are different from these other environments that we might commonly interact with. Maybe not on a daily basis, but fairly regularly, actually. So, community environments we saw are people centered, right? They have a lot of people. There's high human interference and high human presence there. There's no doubt about it. They may or may not involve vegetation depending on the particular environment, as opposed to an agricultural environment where there's mass cultivation of crops. So there's definitely a lot of vegetation there, right? And there's also high human interference because humans manage those crops. However, there's minimal human presence, right? Imagine a field of alfalfa or a field of corn. There's few people there, right? It's mostly the crops. So that gives rise to a different type of pest situation there. Now, both of these, as opposed to a natural environment, how does that look? Well, in a natural environment, there's definitely a lot of vegetation, which is usually wild. There's no management there. It's not cultivated by humans, it just grows wild. And we might even find wildlife there. There's clearly minimum human interference and minimal human presence. So that gives rise to an entirely different pest scenario. So you see how these environments are very different, and naturally, there are differences in approaches to managing pests in these different environments. So, since we're going to be talking a lot about pests, the next question is naturally, what is a pest? A simple question, but its answer goes a long way. Now, this is a common species of butterfly in the southwest, the giant swallowtail, right? I'm sure most of you must have seen this. Would we call it a pest? Of course not. It's beautiful. And according to an American Indian legend, if anyone desires a wish to come true, they must first capture a butterfly and whisper that wish to it. Since a butterfly can make no sound, the butterfly cannot reveal the wish to anyone but the Great Spirit, who hears and sees all. I don't know which tribe or tribes this legend is associated with, but I found it really beautiful. And that's why I chose the butterfly for this question as an example. What is a pest? Right? So, anyway, I'm sure no one would call it a pest because it is really harmless. Right? Butterflies are harmless. And here is the depiction of that legend that I mentioned. I really like it. So, well, butterflies are harmless, but how about the young ones? They're caterpillars. Well, it depends, right? Some people might consider them pests because they feed on plants. To the plant itself, it might be a pest because it feeds on it, right? But other people may not consider them as pests because they're not that many, they're not that numerous. So, 2 points I was trying to bring in here. One is that all stages of an insect or other creature may not look the same, right? And then what is a pest in one situation may not be in another. So, 2 points, but the actions related to pest management, any action you take, whatever you choose to do or not to do, they're all driven by the answer to this one question: what is a pest? So, something to think about. And here are some possible thoughts about pests. So, again, it depends on what we think of a particular creature, right? We can experience fear, anger, joy. In the case of entomologists like me, we experience joy sometimes. You can experience disgust or sadness depending on what the particular creature is doing to you. So, all of our actions are based on those thoughts, and ultimately, this is what decides what management strategy we will take. So, these images are from the Disney movie Inside Out, which I've seen. I thought that they are a great depiction of the different emotions that people feel, right? So, that's why I chose that. But yeah, so again, what is a pest in one situation may not be a pest in another. Just trying to bring that out again in the case of a spider here. So a spider in a garden is clearly not a pest, right? They are beneficial, they're considered beneficial, and they feed on other insects and arthropods. Many of those are pests, so they provide a valuable service there. But if the spider is on your face, that is a different story, right? So, the main reason for all of these misconceptions about insects and many arthropods is that many people don't like insects. There's a general fear of insects or entomophobia, and there's arachnophobia also. Different creepy crawlies. People just don't like them, and so they tend to exaggerate when describing them. So that the picture on the right is a depiction of that. People are trying to conquer or wrestle a huge giant grasshopper, which is clearly not non-existent, right? The fact remains that a very small percentage of all of the insects and arthropods we see out there are pests. Does anyone want to take a guess how many or what percentage it is? I'll give 5 seconds. Well, it's 3%. It's only 3% of all of the insects. See, such a small percentage. So, anyway, let's define a pest for the purposes of pest management. So, a pest is any organism that is detrimental to humans or their interests, any organism that is out of place. Anything like that we define as a pest. And although most people think of an insect when they hear the term pest, pests also include a lot of other creatures. They can be mites, plant pathogens, weeds, mollusks, fish, birds, and mammals. So many, even people, right? So that's a definition of a pest. And here are some problems that are caused by pests. And we've all experienced one or more of these at different times, right? Pests can cause structural damage or crop damage. They can bite or sting, and they can damage food by and other resources, other materials by entering and feeding. They can contaminate food and surfaces. They are a nuisance. Nobody likes pests, right? They can cause allergies and asthma and other sensitive reactions. They can vector disease, microbes, so many things, so many problems that we can think of. Now, the next question is, why are there pests? Why do we have to deal with them? Why do they come to our homes and surroundings? Well, pests, all of the pests that we saw in the previous slides, they're all biological entities if you think about it. And all biological entities need food, shelter, and water, the three basic necessities of all life. And wherever those three are provided, that's where we'll be, right? So, and that's why pests, we have to deal with pests because we provide them food, water, and shelter. And this is probably a good time to bring in the concept of IPM or integrated pest management. For everyone who knows about IPM, who has worked with IPM, this is probably a refresher. And for those that don't know or have never heard about IPM, this is a great moment where you're being introduced to the concept. Now, IPM can be defined in so many ways, but most simply, it is a sensible, environment friendly, and an effective way to solve pest problems. It's a holistic approach to pest management. And one important thing about IPM is that it integrates different pest management methods that are most suited to the particular situation instead of relying solely on one method, which is most commonly chemical pesticides for everything, right? So in IPM, pests are managed by the most economical means or combination of economical means and always with the least possible risk to people, property, and the environment. So that's IPM in a nutshell. So we saw the three different kinds of environments, right, that we might interact with on a fairly regular basis. And it might be interesting to know that IPM did not originate in a community environment setting. It originated in an agricultural situation with field crops. And it originated because of the dangers or the problems that people faced due to excessive pesticide use in agricultural situations. So the ag approach to IPM involves pest sampling of pest populations on a regular basis to develop certain thresholds, economic injury levels and action thresholds for each crop and each pest. Those are thresholds are population levels at which some action has to be taken, right? And removing severely damaged or infested plants is an option in IPM in agricultural environments. So, but what about community environments? Do those principles or those methods apply in community environments? Not all the time, because pests in community environments are complex. Here are some examples: bed bugs in a medical facility, pigeons damaging factory equipment with their droppings, cockroaches in a home kitchen, wild animals in a school campus, weeds in a park. These problems are so diverse and involve so many factors when taking a decision on pest management, right? And so IPM in community environments is community IPM. Now, pest ID is one of the most important steps in managing them. And here is an example of that. Take a look at these pictures and identify the bed bug. So there's 10 pictures here and you can take 5 seconds. Okay. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. How many of you got that right? Think about the answers or put them in the chat. Okay, and so let's see. 4 and 8 are bed bugs. How many of you got that right? See, so let's see what the others are. So the others are not bed bugs. Let's see what they are. So you see that? Who would have thought, right? They look pretty similar. So you see how many arthropods can look very, very similar, but they're not the same. And their management may be entirely different. So this was just a little exercise to bring out the importance of pest ID, which is a very, very important part in IPM. So again, what is IPM? Well, here are some quick takeaway points. Okay, so IPM focuses on the fundamental reason why pests are a problem in the first place. So IPM is proactive and monitoring and inspecting is constant. Now, that doesn't mean it becomes an additional chore. Okay, so once you get into the IPM mindset, it becomes a way of life. It really does. For example, cleaning up after a meal means no food for pests. Sealing up cracks and crevices, repairing door sweeps means no entry for pests. Repairing a leaky faucet means no water for pests. See, in IPM, non-chemical methods are used first and whenever possible, and pesticides are used only when necessary and as a last resort. Now, pesticides or chemical pesticides are really not like banned from IPM. IPM doesn't mean it's anti-pesticides. In fact, pesticides are a very important tool in the IPM toolbox. They're just used wisely. That's all. Okay, so now let's look at some challenges that are unique to pest management in community environments. So the first challenge is that despite the sensitive nature of community environments, the presence of elderly and the children, there are no rules or mandates that govern pesticide use in many of them, such as schools and homes. Of course, there are notification rules. The Arizona Department of Ag has notification rules. And then there's information on pesticide labels, which are actually the law. The label is the law. But even so, There are no rules that govern how many pesticides, what kinds of pesticides can be applied. People can basically do what they want in their homes, right, in their community environments. So, this makes it exceedingly difficult to track pest management actions and their results. That is one of the biggest challenges we face. And we see these kinds of situations, see improper storage of pesticides, excessive use of pesticides. All of these are very, very and so the best way to remedy these problems, and the only way actually, is to educate. We try to educate stakeholders, example, pest management professionals or school and housing personnel, so that they are able to make informed pest management decisions for themselves and for others with who they are interact or they are responsible for, right? That's the only way to go forward. And a lot of the feedback when community IPM is implemented is subjective or anecdotal. You only know, okay, I'm seeing less pests now, okay, than before, or I feel better now than before. These are the kinds of feedback you get. It's very difficult to quantify them, right? So only when you can quantify the results or you get some quantitative feedback, can you really evaluate how effective are your methods? How effective is the pest management? Of course, there are ways to evaluate anecdotal or subjective, qualitative feedback, definitely, but it makes makes it more difficult to evaluate, right? Here are a few others that I've just listed out. Challenges in community environment, unique to community environments. There's no monitoring in PVAs. What are PVAs? PVAs are pest vulnerable areas. And you'll see that in every home or any kind of building or structure or any other community environment, there are places that are more vulnerable to pests. They're pest vulnerable areas. For example, a kitchen in a home, right? A bathroom, or places like that. If there's a fruit tree in the backyard and there's fallen fruit, and there's an irrigation leak, that's a pest vulnerable area, right? So there's no monitoring, very minimal monitoring. That's one of the biggest challenges. There's no PMP hours, pest management professional hours, with residents or staff. The PMPs come and do their job and leave. They'll spray the scheduled spray like twice a month or every week or whatever it is, and they'll just leave. There's no that lack of communication, which results in excessive pesticide use because there's no communication, right? Sometimes there can be over 100 applications in 1 year. That is way too much. No proper ID. We already saw the importance of proper ID, right? And poor knowledge in the general public about pests. For example, one statement have heard is that mice have no bones, right? Because they get in and out of the tiniest of openings. How do they do that? Because they don't have bones, right? So things like that. Then the excessive use of over-the-counter pesticides, poor partnerships, not using available resources, expertise from cooperative extension or other offices. Misconceptions about IPM. There's so many. For example, IPM costs more, which is not the case, and IPM is time consuming, which is not the case. So all of these are challenges that we face. And so why the crisis? Why is there a real crisis because of all this? Uh, and I think the biggest crisis is that pest management is people management. That is where the crisis lies and where it starts, and that's where it lies. And here's a great graphic which depicts that. So the lady is looking for her teapot, but the man of the house is using the teapot to apply pesticides. So a very small example of how difficult it is to manage people. So, and here's another very important challenge, especially in the present time, because of COVID and various other reasons. The turnover is so high. Turnover of knowledgeable staff is so high, which results in heavy workload for the existing staff who have not may not even have been trained. So there's an investment of time to train new hands, right? We all know this. There's lack of trainers. Priorities change. Priorities for organizations change, and again there are misconceptions. So these are the types of challenges we face, which result in situations like this, right? Improper cleaning. So very frequently there's a lot of food sources under heavy equipment or pieces of furniture, things that are not moved regularly, that serve as a resource. There's clutter, a lot of clutter, improper waste management, right, which all leads to pest problems. And then this and which results in excessive pesticide use. Look at all of these examples of pesticide use, right? So many cans of over-the-counter pesticides, improper use of PPE. So the lady there is covering her nose and mouth with a towel, and she's using pesticides. Somebody set off a bug bomb inside a home. Somebody set their mattress on fire in an attempt to get rid of bed bugs. See? All of these are common observations. And what would be the quality of indoor air here in these situations, right? So that's where the importance of air quality comes in. And here I'd like to uh, invite Kelly, my co-presenter, to take over. But before that, I'll just sum up about IPM. Once again, IPM, or Integrated Pest Management, is also intelligent pest management because of that intelligent decision making that is involved. So, for a pest-free environment, here are a few tips keep to keep in mind. One is know the pest species or pest ID. Ensure cleanliness and good sanitation, which goes a long way in keeping pests away. Don't provide food, water, and shelter. This is part of our normal day-to-day chores that we undertake at home or any other community environment that we interact with. Monitor regularly, act promptly. Again, goes a long way in preventing pests. And finally, use least toxic materials because we have so many options available. So with that, I'd like to end this part of the presentation. Here's my contact information. Please feel free to reach out if you have any questions about community IPM or implementing IPM in community environments, in any of the community environments that you interact with. Thank you all once again and stay safe out there. Kelly, over to you now.
Hello everyone, my name is Kelly Gendersack and I am the Air Quality Specialist at the Intertribal Council of Arizona. Thank you so much to Shaku for opening up the presentation to speak about the community IPM crisis. Up next, we'll talk a bit more about how indoor air quality ties in. To first define indoor air quality, we can say it refers to the air quality within and around buildings and structures, especially as it relates to the health of occupants. Americans are known to spend about 90% of their time indoors, where concentrations of some pollutants are often 2 to 5 times higher than typical outdoor concentrations. It's important to note that oftentimes those who are at highest risk for developing adverse health effects from poor indoor air quality are oftentimes those that spend the most time indoors. That includes children, the immunocompromised, as well as the elderly. What does 90% of our time indoors look like? So within a given 24 hours, which is a day, that is about 22 hours of our time indoors, And if you add this up, by the time we are 80 years old, this is about 72 years indoors. So this really, really stresses why it's important to have healthy indoor air quality as we're spending so much time within the indoors. How does indoor air quality and asthma relate? To first define asthma, asthma is a chronic condition in which your airways narrow and swell and may produce extra mucus. This can make difficulty in breathing and trigger coughing and cause shortness of breath. Environmental factors can act as asthma triggers. Indoor air quality and the environmental factors present indoors can be these triggers. And another important thing to note is that the rate of asthma is almost double in tribal populations compared to the national average. If you take a look at this graphic of airways, on the left, you can see a normal airway of a non-asthmatic. The smooth muscle is pretty relaxed and there isn't any extra mucus present. If you take a look at the middle image, you can see an asthmatic's airway when it is not undergoing an attack. And even then, you can see that the smooth muscles are a bit more tightened and there's some excess mucus. If you look at an asthmatic's airway during an attack, all the way on the right-hand side, you can see that the smooth muscles are quite constricted and tightened, and there's quite a bit of extra mucus present. Some of the most common factors for developing asthma include having a parent with asthma, having a severe respiratory infection as a child, having an allergic condition, or being exposed to certain chemical irritants. Other possible risks that increase asthma development include a family history of asthma, allergies, viral respiratory infections, occupational exposures, smoking, air pollution, and obesity. Now let's look at identifying asthma triggers. There are quite a few obvious triggers. There are obviously known triggers or well-known triggers to asthma and asthma attacks. One of the big ones, especially in the spring, is pollen. There's also smoke, molds, pet dander, chemicals such as pesticides, is particularly used in the home, pest allergens, particulate matter, and some not so obvious triggers include stress, fragrances, strong emotions such as laughing or yelling or crying, and some additives in food even. So some symptoms of indoor air pollution, whether you're an asthmatic or not, short term typically can be irritation of the eyes, nose, and throat, headaches, dizziness, fatigue, shortness of breath, sneezing, coughing. But there are also some health impacts from poor air quality over a period of time that can cause other illnesses. So we talked a lot about immediate impacts, but there's also quite a bit of long-term impacts that can be a result of a long period or a lifelong of poor air quality. So we often think of the respiratory system being one of the biggest systems impacted by poor air quality, but there's also your cognitive function and your cardiovascular system, as well as other concerns that are really affected by poor air quality, especially over a long period of time, such as years. There are indoor pollutant sources that contribute to poor indoor air quality, such as your combustion sources, which oftentimes we consider environmental tobacco smoke or your fireplace. There's also volatile organic compounds and other chemicals, such as the pesticides or insecticides we're talking about. Those from natural origins, such as pet dander or pest allergens, molds, and other building materials such as asbestos. Pollutants can enter buildings through various pathways, such as open doors and windows, ventilation systems, openings or cracks within a structure, through your building foundation, or even individuals or pets tracking the pollutants inside. So as we know, pests can act as an asthma trigger and also can contribute to poor indoor air quality. More specifically, it is the feces, saliva, and body parts of pests that can act as this asthma trigger. And pest allergens are known to be more significant triggers in urban communities where they can more easily travel from one building or space to another, and particularly in multi-unit housing where there's quite a bit of nutrients and water sources and different indoor air quality environments that these pests can thrive in. Some indoor pest mitigation strategy to eliminate or reduce the number of pests that may be present in a space include keeping your surfaces clean and free of clutter and food and moisture, keeping your dishes clean, removing any standing water, and eliminating that excess moisture. As we talked about, moisture also contributes to mold growth, but it really can contribute to the success of pest population. You also will need to keep food securely contained and not accessible. If you do store it inside cabinets, you want to make sure there's no cracks or openings within the cabinetry that can allow for access for these pests. Keep your trash contained, dispose of it often. All these mitigation strategies will not necessarily eliminate the risk of ever having pests within your home, but it really can help eliminate the pests from thriving in populations. Um, so these are all just great strategies and of course can really help eliminate the risk associated with pests. Growth of pest, it's also a contributor to the growth of mold. So mold is an asthma trigger and is also an environmental concern for anyone to be breathing in mold and mold spores. And it's a fungal growth that forms in moist, warm areas with poor ventilation. It needs moisture and typically a carbon source to grow. And it forms spores that disperse through the air and form new colonies. So it's very, very adaptable and able to move very quickly within a space. If you do find yourself having mold in your home, if it is more than about 10 square feet, it's recommended to seek professional assistance. However, if there is less than that and you would like to remediate it and learn how to remediate it, you first want to identify and eliminate the source of moisture. This could be a leaking pipe, a leaking roof, whatever it may be, you do want to identify and eliminate that. Then you want to ventilate and dry the area from anywhere near 24 to 48 hours. You will want to use PPE or personal protective equipment. This includes an N95 respirator, gloves, as well as goggles. You'll want to clean the mold from non-porous areas with water and detergent. It's not typically recommended to use mold in most to use bleach in most circumstances, as water and detergent are known to be more effective. You will also want to dispose of any items that are not able to be cleaned from porous surfaces. So this is typically from this can be from rugs, carpets, fabrics. You typically will want to just dispose of those. And of course, seek professional assistance if the situation requires. There are some best strategies to improve indoor air quality. The three basic strategies include source control. So you'll want to eliminate individual sources of pollution or reduce their emissions. So for example, with mold and pests, we talk about eliminating moisture. And so with source control, that would be to fix that leaking pipe or fix wherever that water source is not controlled. You will also want to improve ventilation. You'll want to increase the amount of outdoor air coming indoors. So this can be done through mechanical ventilation. It can be done through opening your doors and windows. One thing to keep in mind is if you are increasing and improving ventilation through opening your doors and windows, you will want to look and check the air quality for the day outdoors. If it is not within adequate ranges, it's not recommended to um, ventilate through that method for that day. Air cleaners. Filtration can be an effective supplement to source control and ventilation, especially during the colder months when you may not want to open the windows and the doors. So air cleaners is another consideration. To best improve your indoor air quality, there are 8 principles that are recommended. These are great to keep in mind and overall target quite a bit of areas that can be concerning to having great indoor air quality. So you'll want to keep the area dry, clean, safe, well ventilated, pest free, contaminant free, maintained, and thermally controlled. And if you follow the other 7, that one about keeping it pest free becomes quite a bit easier because it eliminates the conditions and the factors that really allow pests to thrive. So this by no way is an exhaustive list, but I just wanted to touch on a few different areas of your home. So some best practices to improve indoor air quality within your living room includes cleaning those ceiling fans to make sure you're not dispersing dust and dirt particles throughout the air, making sure that pets are not on your furniture where you are also residing. Sometimes you don't want to be breathing in that pet dander or dirt that they carry in. You'll want to vacuum regularly with a HEPA filter vacuum. In the restroom, of course, make sure your vents are clean. Make sure you're using ventilation system often, especially after bathing or showering. And you'll want to identify if there's any excess moisture or leaking pipes to prevent mold and pests. In your bedroom, it's recommended to launder sheets weekly in hot water to prevent dust mites and also to clean your fans and vacuum regularly. I am going to continue on with the previous list, but these are just general best practices. Of course, this is not exhaustive, but these are just some things to keep in mind. When it comes to cleaning products or pesticides, insecticides, any product that you are using, even to your personal care products, you do want to read and follow the manufacturer's instructions for product use. It's very important to do this to make sure that you are best protecting you and your family from any potential issues from mishandling. You'll want to clean with soap and water and ensure surfaces are dried after cleaning. You want to clear clutter, especially items that are attractive to pests, such as paper products. Cockroaches specifically are very attracted to paper products and boxes and anywhere they can really hide and create a home. And clutter is their favorite, so that's something to think about clearing. You'll want to monitor and check indoor and outdoor plants for pests, especially that standing water that you may have underneath your plant. You will want to drain that. Plants are oftentimes a great place for pests to hide and to gather nutrients from the soil and to have a home. So checking your plants is important. You'll want to ensure humidity of your space is kept within adequate range to mitigate any moisture and limit pest and mold growth. So, of course, check your sinks for leaks, clean your pets and pet bedding often, change your air filters regularly. Don't leave your compost scraps out. If you do typically keep them on the kitchen counter before you put them in a garden, it's recommended to keep them in the freezer until you're able to use them. You want to check the weather stripping on your doors and windows to make sure there's not any cracks or areas for pests to come inside. You'll also want to reduce or eliminate tobacco smoke exposure if that is a concern. and clean your carpets regularly. So I did want to ask a question for you all to consider. Indoor relative humidity levels should ideally be maintained between what percentage range? If you guess C, you are correct. It's ideally recommended to keep your humidity levels between 30 and 50% within a home, or close to this range, so under 60 percent at least. And this really can help mitigate mold and pest growth. Thank you all for coming to the presentation to learn more about the community IPM crisis and how indoor air quality ties in. Here's my email if you are interested in learning more or have any questions. And of course, thank you to my co-presenter, Shaku.